I'm John Atack.
I'm Sam Atack.
And today we're going to talk about Buddhism. And yesterday I had the great pleasure of talking with Michelle Haslam, Dr. Michelle Haslam. Yeah. And she was involved in a strange group called the New Kadampa Tradition.
Yeah.
And I did point out there's, to me, something of conflict between the idea of something being new and a tradition. And it became very apparent to me that although she had allegedly been studying Buddhism, that as with many Buddhists that I've spoken to over the years, she hadn't. And you always, in dealing with a religion, and of course Buddhism isn't a religion because it has no worship or shouldn't have. It's a philosophical tradition. It's a tradition of mystical practice, but it has religious status, even though by definition religion is a system of worship. And the Buddha didn't want to be worshipped. Now, Buddhist sects, something kind of odd happened. The Buddha said that Buddhism would last for 1,000 years, and this was in about 500 before the Christian era, 500 years before. And he did make a bit of a weird comment that if women joined, it would only last 500 years. So a bit sexist, the Buddha sometimes.
And he was wrong.
He was wrong. Buddhism did last for 1,000 years, almost exactly.
I was going to say it lasted for like 10 seconds after it was gone, and then...
well, you can say that. Do you want to say that?
Yeah, I just did. Do you want me to repeat it?
No, not really.
I can't remember what it was anyway.
It only lasted for 10 seconds after he was gone.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, which is about the length of your memory of what you just said.
Worse than a fish.
Yeah.
Less than 2 years.
Yeah. Shorter than goldfish is my memory. Got a singing today. Along came the Mahayana. What happened was that this chap basically projected himself back in time 1,000 years.
Yeah, normal thing.
If you send us the money, we'll tell you how to do it. And he heard a sutra that Ananda, the Buddha's assistant who memorized all of the sutras, they were not written down for 500 years. They were passed on orally. And we've every reason to believe that that could be pretty accurate, actually. That it has been demonstrated that people can remember.
The time travel bit, not so much, though.
Time travel is you probably found a wormhole in space.
Ah, cool. So is this the flower garden sutra?
This is the flower...
Flower gala. Flower... No, it's not going to come.
Flower and water.
Flower...
Famous song by Free.
Water.
Has made you the devil's daughter.
Yeah, lots of songs.
Yeah, lots of songs today. No, it isn't.
Damn.
It's called the Flower Wreath or Flower Garland Sutra, and he basically, that is the sutra upon which the Mahayana, the great vehicle Buddhism, is based. Now, I'd like to point out that nearly all groups that call themselves Buddhist are actually Mahayana. So the Japanese sects, the Myanmar or Burmese sects all through Southeast Asia. The only place where what they insultingly call a small vehicle or Hinayana or Theravadim Buddhism is in Sri Lanka. And unfortunately in Sri Lanka we now have an offshoot of them who are basically terrorists. So in Myanmar they've been killing the Rohingya Muslims with the blessing of this Mahayana sect. And of course Zen Buddhism led to soldier Zen. And many Buddhist Roshis, teachers, masters after the Second World War apologised for having brought the ruthlessness and savagery of soldier Zen. And indeed the man who transmitted Zen Buddhism, this is really nasty, isn't it? But the man who transmitted Zen Buddhism, was mostly responsible for transmitting Zen Buddhism to the West, was a man called Daisetsu Suzuki. And he too was training the military and soldiers Zen.
Oh, that's great.
And he was not himself a Zen Buddhist. He was actually what's called an Amida Buddhist, which is that he worshipped this Bodhisattva, Amida. Now, the difference between the original Buddhism, which we'll call Buddhism, and the Mahayana Buddhism, which we'll call Mahayana, is very simple. The Buddhists said that you must seek enlightenment in the same way that you would leave a house that is burning down. You get out and go. He also said, for anybody out there who thinks they're a Buddhist, you have to read the Digha Nikaya. I'm sorry, you can't just have a little textbook that says, oh, these are the Four Noble Truths.
Oh, yeah, like the little one the family has of their own reduced Bible.
Yeah, you have the Lotus, the Heart, the Diamond Sutra, and that's enough for us.
Yeah.
And the Flower Garland.
Read it.
The idea is that what changed was that rather than you pursuing enlightenment absolutely, vigorously for yourself, you take a vow, which is called the Bodhisattvic vow, which is, I refuse enlightenment until even the grass and the trees are enlightened. So you will be reborn rather than entering nirvana, or nibbana if you prefer the Pali. You will keep on going until everyone else has got it. And so, for example, in the Tibetan tradition, which is also a Mahayana tradition, the Dalai Lama, the current Dalai Lama, is supposedly the 14th incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, who is the Bodhisattva of compassion. So bodhisattvas are basically, they've elevated themselves to the state of Buddhahood, but will not leave into nirvana. And so, in the Tibetan tradition, until the Chinese invasion in 1950, there were 5,000 tulkus, or reborn masters, and they've lost about 3,000 of them, they reckon. I'm not really sure why that would be. I don't know.
They broke their vow, basically.
The GPS systems stopped working or what have you. And that's all very interesting, the way they find tulkus and all of that stuff is very interesting. However, if you look at the lives of the 13 other incarnations of the Dalai Lama, they were all very different people, one from another. There was one of them that used to go to the top of the Potala Palace and pee on the people down below, probably compassionately.
Yeah, so you're saying the most recent one should go and do that to prove that he's actually the same person?
Well, of course, he can't get anywhere near the Potala Palace.
Is it gone?
The Chinese invaded Tibet in 1950, did I just mention that?
Yeah, I think you did. And
he is on the hit list. He's one of... we're getting elaborate here. There are 3 leaders of the Tibetan Buddhists. The Dalai Lama is not only the leader of one of the sects, but he is also the king of Tibet. And he's the reincarnation of the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara. I've probably mispronounced that, by the way, in case you were thinking that I'm really smart. I'm not. But the Buddha taught certain basic things. The Digha Nikaya is the long sutras, and what happened with Mahayana is it travelled out of northern India with a man who's called Bodhidharma in about 500 AD, so 1,000 years, point where Buddha said, my teaching will be lost. This guy travels to China and he sets up the Shaolin Monastery, which is famous now for Kung Fu, of course. That's what he didn't do that. That was later. He did apparently cut off his eyelids so he wouldn't sleep. It doesn't stop you from sleeping. So that wasn't very clever. Because the Chinese had some trouble with the word dhyana, it becomes chan in Chinese. When the Japanese, Rinzai and Dogen, took the tradition to Japan in about the 12th century, I think, they had difficulty with chan, and so they have zen.
Yeah.
This word means sitting. So this is a form of Buddhism or form of Mahayana that basically centers upon you meditating and sitting. So you're emptying yourself and rejoining the plenum void, overcoming samsara, another of the Sam words. And it means that their tendency was not, as the Theravadan Buddhists do, to study the teachings of Buddha. And that could be a bit of a problem. Now, with the new Kadampa tradition, which is different from the old Kadampa tradition.
The old new Kadampa tradition, hopefully, as it will soon be known.
Yeah, well, it depends whether it ever becomes traditional or not.
Yeah.
It's worth saying that the Dalai Lama won't have anything to do with the new Kadampa tradition, which is supposedly a form of Tibetan Buddhism, Mahayana. We were going to use that word. But there are certain basic teachings that it appears to me have been lost. And this is a little passage which for me is the foundation of Buddhism. If you don't get this, and if the people teaching you don't allow this, then you are not a Buddhist. Okay? It's very simple. And one can understand on hearing this why gurus who wish to be worshipped, who want their followers to believe that they are infallible, would avoid this. But this is actually from the Kalama Sutta, which is one of the fundamental teachings of the Buddha. And it reads like this: believe nothing on the faith of traditions, new or old, even though they have been held in honour for many generations in many places. Do not believe a thing because many people speak it. Do not believe on the faith of the sages of the past. Do not believe what you yourself have imagined, persuading yourself that some God inspires you. Believe nothing on the sole authority of your masters or priests. After examination, believe what you yourself have tested and found to be rational, and conform your conduct thereto. Now, I'd like to underline, do not believe on the faith of the sages of the past. Believe nothing on the sole authority of your masters or priests. What the Buddha is saying here is, you don't have to believe what I'm saying. So when the Dalai Lama a few years ago got into hot water by saying that if he found that any teaching of Buddhism was disproven by science, that he would go the scientific route, which caused an outcry around the world.
He was really just
repeating the Kalama Sutta. What's more, people will get into the this is the only way. This is a big one. Ju Kennett, in Selling Water by the River, the basic book of the Mount Shasta Soto Zen sect, says this is the only way.
Yeah.
As soon as somebody says this is the only way, then they're not telling the truth. Because the Buddha said, if the Dharma is lost, it's okay. Because if the Dharma is true, it will be rediscovered. The only thing that can be perpetuated are lies and deceptions. It's also worth pointing out to anybody who hasn't really done their study before calling themselves a Buddhist, that the Buddha spoke of pratikaya. These are Buddhists who have realized nirvana but not taught. So he didn't suggest that he was the only person that had understood this. And he was a man who'd studied for a long time with the priests and sages, the so-called forest sages, who probably the Upanishads would have been what he'd have learned, which are very interesting, by the way. They suggest that the whole universe is a single living entity, a self. And so we're therefore part of a great big lovely thing. I have a tremendous respect for Buddhism. I don't feel that I've studied it in any depth at all. And yet when I meet people who call themselves Buddhists and I say, well, what do you think of the doctrine of anatta? They say, what? And I say that the doctrine that there is no self and that the fundamental illusion is the belief in self. They go, oh, I know the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So, Mahayana may not even be a form of Buddhism, frankly, because it is about, and I agree that it would be better if we could reincarnate to keep coming back. But let's get to the hippie notion of reincarnation. Oh, great, I'll be able to do it in my next lifetime. Yet Buddhists speak of the fear of the eternal return, and the whole purpose of Buddhism, and indeed of many Hindu practices, is to escape the wheel of suffering, and not be reborn. I think that's a terrible idea because it's great being alive. It's a wonderful thing.
I quite enjoy it.
Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to ask me about that, or anything that comes up?
It interests me, the split between the Buddha saying that he teaches but others don't. It reminds me of the split in Taoism of Lao Tzu and Changzu. That Lao Tzu thinks you should go and teach the kings and that sort of thing so they can rule properly. And Changzu thinks you should go fishing.
That's the way I always put it. I don't think he actually did say that. Yes, Lao Tzu says, learn the Tao and teach it to the princes. And Chang Tzu, who was apparently often approached to go and become an advisor to government, said, I'm busy, I need to go fishing. And as a young man, when I, at 17, read the Tao Te Ching and fell in love with this teaching, which has always been more important to me than any of the other things. I guess really Lao Tzu, but I believed that, and I spent a lifetime trying to share, whatever it was I'd found out, and failing miserably. And then, I don't know, about 15 years ago or something, I'd read Chuang Tzu in several versions, but I started reading commentaries on Chuang Tzu and going, I think he was right. What's wrong with me? Why am I not just going fishing? And instead I'm making YouTubes. There's another point that I think is extraordinarily important, and that is that the Buddha, Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu, as far as I can tell, were all atheists. The Buddha, in fact, said if the gods were enlightened, they wouldn't be here, so they don't know how to achieve enlightenment, so even if they exist, don't pay any attention to them.
Yeah, because they'd be gone if they were.
Yeah, they wouldn't be around here, And I don't agree with the Buddha's view of the world that it's all suffering, that the old Chinese vinegar bucket. It's often, there are many illustrations of it. You have Confucius, Lao Tzu, and the Buddha standing by a vinegar barrel, all having tasted the vinegar.
Yeah, I've heard.
And Confucius is going, ugh, and the Buddha is serene, and Lao Tzu is smiling. So it depends whether you like vinegar or not.
I do. I drink it straight from the bottle.
You would. What's significant is that three people who didn't believe in the gods and whose statements about the supernatural tend to be kind of neutral, all ended up being founders of religion.
Yes, and then worshipped.
And it's that difference that you have magical, mystical, and devotional aspects of religious and philosophical teaching. And most, in Christianity, it's a devotional religion. You worship God, you pray to him and ask for stuff. Hopefully you pray for him and ask for the well-being of other people, not just yourself. Though Donald Trump, when asked if he'd ever been sorry about anything, regretted anything, kind of stopped and went,
I just make it right.
No, I haven't. Really.
No, I haven't.
But there are people who pray for forgiveness. And I think prayer's probably a really good idea. It's just, do you do it with yourself? But thinking about...
Do you do it in a closet, or do you make broad
as Jesus suggested, or do you make broad your phylacteries? That was the word you were stuck on, wasn't it?
Well, actually, I did remember phylacteries. I just stopped because...
Yeah. I mean, Shakespeare contracted the word into factories, obviously.
Yeah.
From manufacturers. Phylactery is a little prayer thing that some Orthodox Jews tape to their arm and their head, which and making broad your phylacteries means showing off about praying.
Like having a national prayer breakfast. Or...
Well, actually, prayer in public. One of the things that confused me. I mean, I was going to say, that Buddha, Lao Tzu, Chuang Tzu, Muhammad, and Jesus are all for me, and Aristotle and Plato, Socrates, Epictetus. There are lots of people who've, I look to as wise, as who said things that were very wise, but occasionally they say things I don't agree with. Yeah. And I was watching a thing about the Westboro Baptists last night, that the granddaughter of the founder, Fred Phelps, Megan Phelps Roper has defected and written a book. And she was being interviewed. And it was really interesting that she said her grandfather, who was a lawyer and apparently a pretty successful one, decided that God hates everyone. He doesn't just hate the sin, he hates the sinner. And so they're the people that go to the funerals of soldiers with placards saying they're all fags.
Okay.
You know, and you don't just have the comedy of hate.
So they
the practice of
make fun of people and make them.
Yeah, and apparently he was expelled from the sect at the end of his life, the founder of the sect, because a gay lesbian centre was set up over the street from them. And he one day shouted out to them that they were good people. And that apparently broke with all of the teachings that he'd been putting forward. But it's very interesting seeing how somebody can be conditioned into a set of beliefs and then they look at it and they go, actually, this notion that the Bible is the received word of God, the infallible word of God, is rather difficult. For example, and I don't want to be too contentious here. Oh, yeah, I do. In Genesis, you've got two stories of the creation, and one of which Adam is the last created thing except for the rib that comes out and becomes Eve. And in the other, he helps God name the things as he creates them, because there are two stories that are being shoved together. It's a bit like looking at the biography of Ron Hubbard. You know, it's like it says this here and the opposite there. So from Lao Tzu and Chang Tzu came Husian Taoism or alchemical Taoism, which is a religion. And this is practiced to give you incredibly long life. Yeah. You know, they claim they can live forever and light up the sky with their names. Maybe not that bit. And that is certainly, I see nothing that says that in the original documents. And believe me, I've read so much about this to try and understand it over the years. But in Buddhism, it develops so that you've got this worship, you know, the Amida Buddhism or the Nichiren Shosu, Soka Gakkai, political religion sort of thing. They've got MPs in the Japanese parliament. You know that? Oh, didn't know that, did you? No. So of the Yakuza, as far as I can tell, the Black Mist. But that's not a religious topic. But this notion of worshipping, I'm going to finish off by reading this again because this is really important. This is the Buddha. This isn't some guy who's trying to get your money. And by the way, if he's trying to get your money, he's not telling you the truth because you do not sell wisdom. As a Shankaracharya of the North, one of the sort of Pope of Northern Hinduism, explained when he was asked about Maharishi, so-called great teacher, Mahesh Yogi, he said, did he charge money? He said, yes. He said, it's not genuine. And the Sufis say the same thing, and your vicar shouldn't be charging you, basically. I nearly made a rude comment there, I'm not going to. Believe nothing on the faith of traditions, even though they have been held in honour for many generations in many places. Do not believe a thing because many people speak it. Do not believe on the faith of the sages of the past. Do not believe what you yourself have imagined, persuading yourself that some god inspires you. Believe nothing on the sole authority of your masters or priests. After examination, believe what you yourself have tested and found to be rational, and conform your conduct thereto. And we hope that you will conform your conduct thereto. We try to conform our conduct thereto several times a day. I'm John Atack.
I'm Sam Atack.
And thank you very much for spending your time with us.